thank you so much, Mr. Rao, for the warm introduction, and an absolute pleasure to be here and chatting up with CII members today, this morning. Uh, I think what we're going to do is over the next 30 minutes or so, not more than that, we're going to look at, what is it that drives sustained superior performance. And I think all those three key words are quite critical for all of us as business leaders. And I'm going to try and share with you what could be the way that you could take forward in terms of achieving this objective, which is there for every single organization that I would know of. I'm going to keep it very crisp and very sharp. Over the course of the next several fortnights, we'll dive into various elements of this. But today is going to be a broad overview in terms of really what are the fundamental principles that actually help you drive sustained superior performance. Because as business leaders, all of us know that it's really not about getting a good month result or a quarter result or a 1 year result. I think great organizations are built when you're able to deliver sustained results over a long period of time and not over a short period of time alone. So that's what we're going to try and do. I would love this to be a lot more interactive. As Mr. Rao said, this is going to be a one-way communication really in terms of my presenting to you. But I think I would be very, very keen to take your questions. And I look forward to a lot of interaction with you when we get to the Q&A session. I'm going to try and answer every single question that you would raise. But as Mr. Rao said, that in case there is paucity of time, we will actually look at coming back to you. That's why I'm keeping it just about 30 minutes for me to talk to you, and then I want to hear from you and look at what questions you may have on what we are talking about today. So let's dive into really this whole, mythical thing about sustained superior performance. So superior is obviously something that we would all want. We want to do better than others are doing in the market. As business leaders, performance, every business has a lot of different metrics it drives. It could be top line, it could be bottom line, it could be employee productivity, it could be, various different metrics that you may use in your own businesses. But the key operative word is really how do you sustain this? Yeah, I mean, I think we've all had experience, and I can share from my personal experience. Oftentimes, we all know that success comes as a result of accident or good fortune. We may have plans, we may have strategies, but really, is it that what is getting executed out in the market as we go and run our businesses? And I think that's where the root cause or the root of solutions come from. So let me dive in, and I'm going to share with you what really is it that drives sustained superior performance. There are very clearly, irrespective of what business, what industry, what level of organization you are, there are a few key principles. And we must remember that principles are unchangeable, right? Simplest example I can give you for principle is that, gravity is a principle. Whether you're in Delhi, Lucknow, in Calcutta, in Chennai, in Bangalore, gravity doesn't change. It's there everywhere. Likewise, from a business perspective, principles are ones which will be applicable irrespective of what businesses we are in, as I said earlier. So what is the first principle that we really talk about? The first principle is really about saying that you need to have a very sharp focus. Now, a lot of different definitions could be existing around it, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more so that we have clarity on what do we mean by focus. But in simple words, it's really about saying, do people really know what has to be done? Now, various organizations, depending on your size, your organization, geographical presence, we do a lot of stuff around communication, sharing what is it that we want to do in the year as a company, all those aspects. But I think we have a slightly different connotation of the word focus, and I'm going to share that with you. Because every one of us as business leaders would have created, what is it that we want to achieve? We would have then said that, okay, we're going to start creating the business, and you would have people, you would have technology resources, you would have manufacturing capability. You will set up KRA, KPIs, what results are required of each different role in the organization. But yet, there is a gap in there, and we will look at what focus in our definition is all about. The second pillar that drives sustained superior performance is really about looking at, do we have engaged employees? Now, I know this is, I'm sure for all the attendees out there, this is a big, big issue in today's environment that we operate in. My belief as a business leader always has been that every business, end of the day, is all about people. If we have engaged employees, they become really the accelerator and the catalyst for driving superior results. What do I mean by an engaged employee? Simply said, do people care enough to put in their best when they come into work? You know, when your employee walks in at 8:30, 9:30, is he bringing his best forward, or, if I may put it a little crudely, is it a warm body walking inside your door? And we're going to look at this aspect as well, because to me, this is one of the most critical aspects, and I think a very, very big challenge for all businesses across industry, across different size of organization. And I don't think any of you would disagree on that point. The third pillar that we really look at in terms of driving superior performance is really about discipline in execution. I think that is most significantly a very, very big issue. Discipline and leaving cultural nuances apart, it fundamentally to me means, do people really do what they have said that they will do? That's what discipline is all about. And I think, like I said earlier, this is one of the most critical issues in terms of driving. I think, the simplest example I can give you that, in our 6-7 decades of independence, if there is one institution in the country that has stood steadfast and, of course, got impacted a little bit by societal changes, but still remains very resolute and still very respected for what it is our defense forces. And we all know that the defense forces epitomize what discipline is all about. Now, I'm not saying that you go ahead and create a military force in your organization by no stretch of imagination, but certainly discipline is one of the most critical pillars of driving sustained superior performance. In our assessment, if you put all of these together, is when you start driving business results which are better than market, they're consistent, and you can do it again and again and again, which drives sustenance of business over a period of time. Let's dive in a little bit into this, right? I mean, this is still a very broad view of what are the three pillars that drive sustained superior performance, and start looking at each one of them a little bit more in detail. So let's look at the first one, which is focus, right? And my simple question to you is, aren't we already focused? Isn't everyone focused really about what is it that we're going to drive, right? And I think we will all say that, yes, we are very focused, and our people are very focused. But there are some very interesting statistics that I want to show you, which is bringing out the reality of the real world versus what our assumptions might be. So in recent times, there's an organization called Harris Interactive, which actually does a lot of research. And one of their findings is that it's only 15% of employees who can clearly articulate their organization's goal. Just 15%. I remember we were engaged with a small FMCG organization in South, and we were working with them, and their CEO had shared the company's goal, what was the objective for the year. He had very clearly set out 3 different goals out there. And he had done town halls. Whenever he would go to a geography where his office was, he would do some kind of an all hands or a team meeting where he would share with them what is it that the organization is going to do. But the interesting thing is, as we started to work with them, with the managing director of this company, we said that we're going to do a little bit of a diagnostic and do a little bit of a dipstick as to what is it that people really understand what their goals are, what is the company goal. Interesting thing was when we actually polled their people across the hierarchy to ask them a very simple question. What are your 3 organization goals for the year? You'll be surprised. Instead of 3, we got 103. Shocking, I'm sure. Yeah. But that's where the whole paradigm of communication comes in. It's very easy to say we'll do town halls, we will do all-hand meetings, we'll do email communication. People often hear what they want to hear rather than what you want to say or what you want to communicate. And that creates a big, big problem. Clearly, with this single statistics, you can realize why results are a challenge. If only 15% people are clear about what the organization goals are, I don't know what the rest of the 85% are driving. And I'm sure that's a challenge in most businesses today. All the experience I'm sharing with you cuts across a section of my own experience in different companies, working with a lot of different companies in different industry verticals. I've been very fortunate in my career to work across varied industry verticals, as well as our learnings in our consulting experience of working with organizations of all sizes and stature. So that's one aspect, right? And that starts to dispel that thought that we had that, yes, our guys are very focused and they are very clear of what has to be done. The second interesting thing is only 10% of employees who know the key metrics of their business. There are only 10% people. So one is knowing about the goal. So knowing about the goal is not adequate. It's also knowing about how are we measuring ourselves against that metric, against that goal. People who could articulate what is the metric of success is only 10%. Gets even more worrisome. I'm sure you agree with me, right? Let's start looking at another aspect. How much time are our people spending on really what is the most important thing for our organization? And again, another shocking number for you is that it's just 49% people who are actually clear on what amount of time is being spent on the more important goals for their organization. So like I said earlier, we may have strategies, we may have goals, we may have KRAs, KPIs, we will have compensation goals, we'll put in performance metrics. The challenge is that once you sit down and make a plan and you have your senior leadership involved, you start propagating it to people, the challenge is, do they go back and start doing what they were doing earlier, or are they altering the course? Because we all know if you keep doing what you did earlier, you'll get the same result that you got earlier. So very clearly, when you as a business leader set up a new goal or a new direction or a new strategic vision for your company, people will have to start doing things differently and different things. The challenge is most people will come in, we will have a nice brainstorming session, decide, say this is what we're going to do. But after that, if we go back and do exactly what we were doing earlier, we will end up with the results that we get, which is a mixed bag. And I'm not saying that we are all struggling for results, but I'm very sure also that all of us want even better results. So that's really about focus. And let's look at it. This is a great company, and I'm going to share with you 2 examples. One, obviously, from the most famous company that we all know of. And I think this quote by Tim Cook is absolutely clear on what focus means. Interestingly, especially in the Indian context today, we all have lots and lots of different opportunities that we can go after. India truly, I believe, is a land of opportunities, and you can go and do business in multiple different spaces, new markets opening up, new ways of doing business opening up, new go-to-market models that you can create, a lot of disruption happening, great opportunities. But the challenge with all of that is, will that defocus us? And that quite often is actually what happens. Often when we try and do what we are wanting to do, there are distractions that come up, and often we get sidetracked by those distractions that come up. So interestingly, I mean, this is what Tim Cook is saying, but let me share with you that when Steve Jobs came on back into Apple, Apple at that point was struggling. And he was very clear. I mean, he sat through a whole series of meetings and presentations from different product groups, different people who were looking at different parts of the business. And after the end of it all, he said that, listen, hey, this is all great stuff you guys are doing, but can you go back and distill it down to 10 things that you think are the most critical things to be done for the company? Great people went back, brainstormed, did smaller meetings on their own, came back to him with 10. He sat them down and he said, okay, these 10 are great, but honestly, we can't really focus on 10 of them. So how about getting it down to just 3 of them right now? That was a big surprise for the people who were on that meeting. But yeah, I mean, through consensus and debate and discussion and brainstorming, they actually came down with 3. You know what Steve Jobs did after that? He said that, okay, out of this 3, we're going to take only 1, and that's what we're going to drive. And that product was the iPod, which came and revolutionized the whole industry. And there was no looking back for Apple from that point onwards. And of course, the success story continued with the iPhone and all the other great products. But you got to remember, the telling thing is that you can put all the Apple products on a small little table, and that company drives $240 billion of revenue. And look at how their growth has been. A sustained 33% CAGR over the last decade. Wouldn't we all love that? Yeah. And I think that really tells you what focus means. It means an obsessive passion to drive that one single big transformational change that we want to do. This may seem simplistic, or you may say that, hey, listen, obviously I need to have multiple goals. But you've got to remember, there is, interestingly, a very simple law which actually allows us to start saying, hey, what is the most important thing that we want to do? And that is the 80-20 rule, Pareto's law, if I may call that, right? Oftentimes, when you go down and look at your own goals that you set for your organizations, there'll be probably 1 or at most 2 goals, the achievement of which is the most critical. What I mean by that is, you might have 5 different goals for your organization. But if you don't do that one goal, then the achievement of all the other 4 pale into comparison. I would rather have achieved that one than achieving the other 4, or maybe 2. And I think that is really what focus is all about. Let me take another example. A company which we are all very, very familiar with. I think they will celebrate their 10th anniversary this year. They've just been in the market for 10 years. But I think a great example of what focus is all about. So I'm sure all of us travel across, go across to different cities. But there was one airline that came in and said, listen, we're going to do one very simple thing. We're going to have just one key goal. And that airline, I'm sure a lot of you would have guessed by now, is nothing but Indigo. They were unequivocal in terms of the fact that our objective across the organization, across functions, across geographies, across levels of hierarchy, is how are we going to be on time every time. They have orchestrated their entire business model on that single focus of how can we be on time every time. Now, interestingly, it's not that other airlines are not focused on time, but in contrast, there is an interesting example of an airline which does not exist right now, and I think we have a very controversial story going around that, which I think is very sad. But I remember this airline when it came out, and I know you know which airline I'm talking about. That airline was very interesting, and I remember once I was flying business class. In business class, they would actually come and take your specs and clean your specs. I mean, I wear spectacles, and I love keeping the glasses very, very clean. But interestingly, they would come and go to that level of service. Did I like it? Absolutely, it was a pleasure. Yeah. But remember, most of us travel for business. If I have to go, and I'm based in Gurgaon, if I have to get into Bombay and I have a meeting at 10:30 at BKC, I want to make sure that I am there on time for the meeting, but I also want to make sure that I'm not waking up an unearthly hour to take a 6:30 flight. Can I take another airline which can actually make sure, more times than anybody else, that I will get into Bombay and be able to get into BKC. I'm not talking about the road traffic, of course, that they don't have control over. But how can I actually drive that kind of singular focus on what our objective is? And I think that's what makes them successful. And if you look at what they do, how they do it, every single element of their business model is structured to really look at how do we make sure that we get you from point A to point B on time, hassle-free. Great example of how, leaving aside everything else, they are looking at only that as being the focus. Now, let's spend a couple minutes more on Indigo. When they started off, they didn't have any in-flight services. And even when they started, they had no warm beverage or any warm food that they would serve to you. Was that not important for a traveler? It sure was, right? And there'll be airlines who will say, hey, we give you the best food on flight and all of those kind of things. Sure, exciting. But again, I go back, is that more important for me than being on time? And they said, listen, everything around our business is going to center around making sure that we are on time. So the moment I start doing hot beverage, it takes longer time to service. It also goes and messes up my business model because I want to be low cost as well. So the moment I put on heating in the aircraft in the galley where they heat up the water or whatever, it's going to consume more fuel, so it's going to push my cost up. And also then loading that food is also going to take more time. So they said, hey, we're not going to do any of that. And they were very, very focused on just that one single aspect of being on time. I'm going to share with you a few statistics which I just pulled out of the web, and that will bring home to you how an airline with that one single focus has been able to transform itself from a new entrant coming in a decade back to the leader right now. Look at their on-time performance. It is 83.8%, number one. Look at the number of flights that they mount. That's the highest number of flights. Now, you all understand that, if I have 10 flights flying, being 84% might be fine. But if I have 100, 200, 500 flights every single day, that 84% becomes even more significant. Number of flight cancellations is, by the way, on the bottom, it's the least number of flight cancellations is Indigo. If you look at the market share that they've been able to gather in the last 10 years, again, number one. That is what shows you that how passionate obsession with your key goal is going to help you drive sustained superior performance. So that's as far as really the focus part is concerned. And of course, we could go on and look at various different elements. But for the purposes of our discussion today, let's dive into the next element of what is it that drives sustained superior performance. And which I said is the El Dorado, or is the mythical beast out there, the unicorn, so to say. Engage employees. Yeah. There's an interesting study conducted by Gallup, and in fact, my apologies, this is the 2013 data. I have the 2015 data as well. I could put that together on this one. It says that when you open your doors in the morning, what is the state of the employee who's walking in? So it's categorized simply as three different levels: engage employees, not engage employees, and actively disengage employees. What does this mean? It means that people who walk in the morning with the full passion of saying, I'm going to give my organization and my business objective and my responsibility 100%. Actively disengage employees are the ones who are actually creating more disruption in your organization rather than creating a positive contribution. And the not engaged are actually the ones who are warm bodies that are working in. They are there to do a 9 to 6 job and go back home. That's about it. They're not bringing their passion. They're not bringing their best. They're just coming in because they're just doing a simple job. Shocking, right? The numbers. And I'll give you another perspective. When we say that 9% and 9% are actively engaged and 10% are actively disengaged, it means that for every 1% is walking in full of passion, using a step, saying, I'm going to do something great today for my company, for my role, for my responsibility. There are 3 people walking in who are actively creating dissonance in your organization. And hey, the rest of the six any witches are there just doing the job. Now, engagement comes at various different levels. It's not a singular level. It's obviously about my primary needs, and I think some of you are familiar with the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs. Obviously, it's about individual primary needs. It's what I'm responsible for. How do I meet my basic needs? And therefore, how do I contribute to it? But getting people engaged and connected and driven is when you actually start looking at how are they connected with the teams. Every single business that I would know of requires cross-functional collaboration. How are they working with other functions? Are they in a cooperative mode? Are they in a combative mode? Or are they, I will wait till the other function responds and then I will respond? Or are they actively going and seeking out solutions which can help drive your business? Ultimately, I think people have to feel empowered to say that, listen, in this business, I can go and make a contribution. I can make this business better than what it is today. And I think that really is what we all want to achieve in our organization, that people walk in, actively engage and saying, listen, I'm going to go and contribute. Now, that requires getting people very clearly aligned to that goal as well, right? A lot of people talk about the fact that, hey, people leave for salaries and all of that. Sure, they do leave for salaries. But I'm sure a lot of you on the call right now would agree with me that a lot of people actually leave either their manager or the organization. I have, for all my career, believed that oftentimes organizations fail their employees rather than employees failing the organization. I say that simply because when you're hiring a person, you do your best to get the right guy for the job. Why is it that when he comes into an organization, he starts to become a liability? And I would strongly suggest that we stop, ponder, and introspect a little bit as to what is it that we as organizations do in terms of taking these people who we hired as passionate people who would come and contribute to our business to suddenly now start becoming liabilities. Now, that's something for you to wonder over. But let me go back to the example of how having that one single goal helps people align very sharply and become more committed and more driven as well. So we'll go back to the example of Indigo, right? We've actually gone, some of my fellow colleagues, and we've actually, if you're not endorsing any of the brands on this call, if you may so think, but we've actually gone and chatted up with a lot of people as we travel around. And it's interesting how you could go and ask every single person when you go to the airport as to what is their metric or what is it that they are doing to drive their organization's goal of on time. Interestingly, you'll find everyone knows what they're supposed to do. I remember a couple of months back, I was coming back from Pune and I was standing at the gate, the boarding gate before you get on the bus. And I gently asked the lady as to what is the metric that you are measured on. And interestingly, she said, I have one very simple metric. I have to get everyone in from the hall onto a bus in 10 minutes. That's her rule. You go and ask a bus driver who shuttles you from the building to the airport, to the aircraft on the apron. He's very clear that he's going to get people on board and be there even while the aircraft is being emptied. And look at how they make sure, and they were one of the first, now of course a lot of other airlines are doing, they make a very clear announcement while you're in the bus that passengers seated from row number 1 to 16, please board from the front, and the rest board from the rear gate of the aircraft. It's amazing how they're looking at every element. They were the first ones to come in with check-in kiosks. They were the first ones, and obviously they realized that they came up with this dehydrated food, and I'm sure a lot of us would experience the upma and the dehydrated stuff that they give you. They just pour water and there is your meal ready. Reduces weight that you're carrying and all those kind of benefits that come in with not having to take too much time to load up. Every person, the cabin crew, makes a very simple announcement, and it's interesting. Being on time is a wonderful thing, and we at Indigo are committed to it. I don't know how if you relate with this, but it so happened the other day. I love flying with Indigo, obviously, you could make that out. But I was flying on another airline, and I hadn't flown non-Indigo for a fair bit of time. It was another airline where this is not the protocol. And somehow, when I finished my meal, whatever snack that I was having, I was waiting for somebody to come and throw the trash in. We become so programmed that we realize it's such a simple thing for us to do. And you suddenly start to realize that there are a lot more people than your own employees who are contributing to your organization mission. Yeah, very interesting story there. But I think that should get you a perspective. Now, engaged employees requires a lot of things. It requires people to feel wanted, to feel participative, to feel that their voice is going to get heard in the system. And there are methods to go about bringing in a higher level of engagement in your employees. That's something that we could help with. But let's get on very quickly, and I think I've taken more time than I thought I would, but I'm really enjoying sharing this with you. The third pillar, very clearly, as I said, is it's all about discipline. Say it, do it, every single time. The challenge is, like I said earlier, we come into a meeting, we decide this is what is going to be done, this is a new plan. Obviously, the new plan will not happen if you keep doing what you were doing. The challenge is we go back and start doing absolutely the same thing, right? So I think this is what we need to start looking at as to how do we bring discipline about. There is a great thinker of strategy and organization behavior and execution. He has these great words which I just want to share with you. Discipline is based on pride, on meticulous attention to detail, and on mutual respect and confidence. Do you think that's not what you want for your business? I'm sure all of you will agree that yes, that is what you want. Now, the key thing here is, you may say that our societal norms are not aligned to that. But as a business leader, you got to drive your business, your stakeholders' return to maximum. And therefore, it is your responsibility to see how do I, at least in my organization, bring about a different culture. So discipline must be a habit, as Gary says, so ingrained that it is stronger than the excitement of the goal or the fear of failure. It has to become part of our DNA. It has to become part of how we operate. It has to become part of what my daily regime is. Which is why it's not just about discipline, it's about getting the cadence, it is about getting the commitment and the accountability. That's how you drive sustained superior performance. Now, this obviously is not just about individual discipline. This discipline is all across the organization. There is a team goal. We will make our commitments, and then we'll make sure that there are other functions who are supporting us. They are aligned to our commitment, which is aligned to the team goal. And then we are owners of responsibility, which is where the accountability perspective comes in, to make sure that we deliver what we are talking about. So that's really about discipline. And I know I took more time than I thought. But if I were to sum it up, you may say, hey, we have great focus, but do you have engaged employees? Do you have discipline? And I think this simple figure should bring it out very clearly to you. Yes, I may be very high on focus, but if I don't have engaged employees, you will drive that focus. You will be very, very task-driven, and you may get incremental results, right? Obviously, low focus, low discipline, low engaged employees, your results are just about whatever you get, and you should be happy for what you get. If you have very highly engaged employees but low focus, remember that's also not the panacea to our problems, because it's only going to get you short-term results. Where you start driving sustained superior performance is when you have all these three vectors aligned. And that is really what helps organizations drive sustained superior performance. So that was really a quick view on what is it that you could do in your businesses. And just as a passing thing, at Strategy Results, we are a very focused niche consulting company. Our idea is really to help leadership drive results. And results which are sustained, which are superior again and again. And that's where we help organizations really embed some of these things into the culture of their organization. So I leave you with that thought, and I'm open to any questions that you would have.